G'day Internet, my name is Joe Levine and I run Encounter Terrain, and today we are going to be chatting with Eric from Eric's Hobby Workshop. Let's see what he has to say about life. G'day Eric, do we have you?
Oh, we do now. There we go.
We do.
Okay. So,
how you doing, mate?
to enable microphone or something. I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. We seem to have picked the same background.
Yeah. I was thinking maybe I should stage some things back there, hobby related. This is not where normally I film my content because there's noise going on out there right now. But
I was thinking the same thing.
Today.
You know what? More us for everyone else. So
there you go.
Let me be the first to welcome you to the very first ever Encounter Terrain hobby interview. It is still unnamed, but this is it. This is the pilot. This is the beginning.
Well, I'm honored. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. It is an absolute pleasure. So let's get straight into it. I've got these questions in my hot little hands here. So we are going to get straight into it. First off, how are you and what on earth is happening in your life?
I'm good. There's, what is going on in my life? Oh, we're right to the big questions, eh?
Straight there.
Well, my wife and I are here in New York. We're enjoying life. We're thinking about maybe moving out of the city a little bit with everything that's going on. It's been a little bit crazy around here the last couple months, as I'm sure it is pretty much everywhere in the world. Mm-hmm. But things are starting to get back to normal. But there's always this talk of maybe there's going to be a round two, whatever. So that's in the front of the mind. But hobby-wise, everything's going great. My channel's growing really well. Eric's Hobby Workshop, for those of you that don't know me. And I got a lot of cool projects lined up, some really cool collaborations. And most gratifyingly, it seems like I'm kind of improving quickly as well as I've created some structure around my hobby. So that's really nice. So things are going well. Things are going really well. Awesome.
That's really good to hear, especially in times like now where the world seems to be not doing fantastically. Let me put it that way.
Yeah.
Right now,
there's a little cool anecdote there because there's so much doom and gloom about like how everything has gone for the worst due to COVID. But one thing that I saw that was kind of a silver lining recently is I was doing some research about Petra in Jordan.
Yep.
Which is an archaeological site that gets I think 1.9 million visitors in 2019.
Wow.
And they have no video visitors right now because of COVID. So they've actually been able to do some new excavations because there's no one there. So right in front of like the famous treasury and everything, where normally it's mobbed with tourists, they're doing some excavations now. So that's
awesome.
Cool.
It probably hasn't been that empty. Probably hasn't been that empty since they were filming Indiana Jones there.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's never empty. So they got a really cool opportunity now to. And I'm sure there's lots of stories like that. Like, I mean, when New York was just freshly shut down from COVID, there was like a lot of there was no one on the streets, and you could really tell the air was noticeably fresher. Like, it was kind of amazing. Like, I didn't even think about like that the air quality wasn't good until I go out and I'm like, oh,
well, this is what it is meant to be like.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, try to look for the bright side.
Always got to look for that silver lining. Now, you mentioned Eric's Hobby Workshop, your channel on YouTube, obviously growing quite considerably. I think I checked it just before. I think you're up to about 29,000 subscribers.
I'm 31 something now.
31. So. I must have looked at an old picture. It was just a screenshot. So 31,000. Holy moly. So I guess that brings me to the next question is, how did you get into the hobby?
It was a long time ago. You want the short version, the medium version, or the long version?
Let's start at the short version, and then I'll ask you to expand if we need.
Sure. The short version is I had a next door neighbor when I was a kid that sort of lived in the same house as us, a semi-detached house, and there was two older kids, and my brother and I used to go over there every day after school just to watch them play computer games.
Yep. And
then one day I went over there and they had set up on the pool table some of the old like third edition. I think it's third edition. Second edition, maybe, orc models, all the Gretchens with the pointy helmets and everything set up on the pool table. Mm-hmm. And I was kind of like, what is this? Like, this is, played with Lego like every kid did, and I like to build and stuff. I used to have micro machines, little models.
Love them.
But the thing that always drove me nuts about micro machines was that the guys are this big, and the tanks are this big, and the airplane's this big, and the aircraft carrier is this big. You know, like it didn't make, there was no internal consistency with the scale.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized quickly that Warhammer really cared about that.
How old were you when you
to detail?
How old were you at that point?
This would have been like 1997 or something. So
okay.
I would have been, 8 or 9.
Right. Okay.
And I didn't actually collect any of them at the time. I didn't know where to get them, and I was still probably too young. But a couple of years after that, I was having a sleepover with my friend, and he brought over a box of Gene Stealers.
Yep.
And I was a pretty artistic kid, so he asked me to help him paint them.
Awesome.
And I basically got, he brought some paints, and I figured out how to dry brush. So the old Gene Stealer models had this beautiful vein on the side of their head, and I dry brushed it, and it really popped, and he was so happy with it that he started giving me like all his best models to paint. And there was sort of a fad that then started up in my school where everyone was into Warhammer.
Yeah.
And kids knew me that I was the guy to go to if you wanted to get your models painted. So kids gave me all these like greater demons and like all these crazy models. And then just like that, the fad died. You know how things are when you're in like elementary or whatever?
Yeah.
The fads come and go like so quickly. And I would say like, hey, do you want your greater demon of Nurgle back? And they're like, no, I don't care about that. You can keep it. So I have all these old models from that era of guys just giving me their stuff and then changing their mind about if they ever cared about it. So that's kind of cool.
That's really great. I've got a couple of, I think they're second or third edition little Gretchen orcs and a couple of little, I think they're space goblins or space. I'm going to be honest. I don't Warhammer. I don't know much about Warhammer.
Sure.
I love the figurines. I've got quite a few of them that I use for Dungeons & Dragons, but I will be learning at some point soon. Someone's told me they're going to teach me how to play Kill Team or Warcry, one of the bite-sized versions first.
You ever stepped on one of those old goblins with the spiky helmet?
Yeah, I did like last week because I use one. There's one that I use for all my photos, and it dropped on the ground, and 1d6 piercing foot damage.
There you go. Yeah. No, but growing up, so I got 4 brothers.
Yep.
And they all got into Warhammer Fantasy at the same time as me. Shortly after my friend brought me this box or whatever. So the cool thing that's kept me in the hobby all these years is that my brothers and I all live in different parts of the world, and you know how like brothers are. Like you won't call up your brother just to chat, but you will call him up to talk about something like a shared interest.
I know exactly what you
Warhammer
mean.
really keeps us together.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, me and my brother used to paint Warhammer as well when we were young. Neither of us know how to play, but he started getting the Lord of the Rings box sets, and I just had one little packet of Space Marines, and that was it. But I know exactly what you mean. It's awesome to be able to like chat to family about stuff that matters to you and stuff that matters to them, because family doesn't seem to matter to family in the heat of the moment. Until the crunch time, then family comes first. But let's move right along. Whilst you're getting so you started out just sort of like painting for your mates' friends, for your mates and for your friends and for everyone in between, painting their stuff, painting your own stuff. Nowadays, is there any sort of planning you do before you start a new project, whether it's painting minis, building terrain, that sort of thing?
Sure, planning wise, like so nowadays I think a lot about videos. What'll be a cool video, right?
Yep.
Obviously, I want people to watch my videos because a bunch of effort goes into them. And I think about a couple things. I think about what would be something that people want to watch, obviously. So I try to do something that's not been done many times over, unless I have my own spin I can put on it. But I'm also thinking about like what's a piece that I want to have around, what's a piece that's going to appeal to the people I game with, what's going to appeal to my brothers, and what's going to appeal to me in terms of something that I would like to see. And then from there, I kind of go into looking at reference images of, and not usually pictures of something someone has built before, but something from the real world. Either things that I've taken before or Pinterest. Pinterest is a big one that I often go to. And then I just kind of start breaking down what I think I want to build and how I'm going to build it, and just kind of go from there. Not a whole lot of planning usually. Sometimes I'll do a quick pencil sketch, but I kind of am a fly by the seat of my pants type guy.
Yeah. I saw that you had done a sketch for that big one that you did recently. The name is just slipped my mind. The one that it would have been, I don't know, maybe this big. Your big like hills made out of
the
cork.
Desert Wasteland Fort.
That one.
That one. Yeah.
I saw a drawing for that, and I was like, "Ooh, he draws." That was an awesome build.
Well, I do draw, yeah, but the sketches usually I'm usually just kind of scribbling to find the silhouette.
Yeah.
You know, because the silhouette is very important for how things read from far away.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the same. Like even if you look at miniatures, you notice that the most striking ones, like from when they're on the table and you're 10 feet away, they still look good because just the shape of the arms, the staff, and whatever it is kind of works as a whole from a distance. So I think a lot about that.
Yeah.
What will look good from a quick glance, and then you can break that down into component shapes and fill the details in after.
Yeah, awesome. So, what sort of thing keeps you motivated after you start building something? So I know a lot of people sort of start and then they have the justification like I do, where the best time to start something is 60% through the one that you're currently working on. But you have a lot of finished pieces. So what sort of keeps you motivated to keep going?
Well, for one thing, there's always a drag in the middle, but pushing through to get it off of the table is always a big one, because I never put things away half finished, and I don't have enough space to have too many things on the go at once. So it helps that I kind of have a little bit of a deadline from the YouTube side,
mm-hmm.
and then also just the mental knowledge that if I finish this, I can move on. And then kind of knowing when to break down. Like I think it's very, very tiring to make decisions, creative decisions. When there are some tasks that you don't need to use very much of your brain, you can just kind of turn off. You can be listening to a podcast or watching a TV show while you work.
Yep. So
it's kind of important to identify those and separate them, because if you're just kind of slogging through and having to make a creative decision every few minutes, it's mentally exhausting and it gets very frustrating, at least for me.
Yeah.
So I try to definitely break it up in a way where I'll make an executive decision and then I'll just put on a TV show or a podcast, or I'll be sometimes sitting in the living room and just, my wife will have something on the TV and we're just in the evening kind of relaxing as I build, and that helps me get through some of the, the tedious parts of the build that get you to the finish line.
Yeah.
And then it also is helpful sometimes to just take a break and get down to table level and put a miniature on there and start just kind of take a moment to just appreciate what it's going to be like to play with, and that always brings some of the joy back.
Awesome. One other thing.
Yes. One other thing I should add is I do build stuff in sort of the futuristic 40K Necromunda world, and then also in the fantasy world.
Yep.
And I kind of alternate between those, because sometimes when I finish a big project, I'm a little bit burned out even on the setting itself.
Yeah.
So to start something in its completely different setting keeps things fresh for me as well.
That is a great point there, because I build a lot of, as you'd be aware, I do a lot of nature, landscape, foresty style, generic fantasy forest terrain.
Precarious cliffs,
yeah. And it starts to get a little bit tedious after the 4th hour of dry brushing grey. So so it is great to swap it over. When you're building / painting, let me put it this way first. Would you consider yourself primarily a miniature painter or a terrain builder first off, more than the other?
That's interesting, because I'm probably at this point more of a terrain builder. And I guess the reason for that is, my brothers and I, we all have armies and stuff. And if I painted up one of my own guys and showed it to them and said, like, look what I did, and they go, oh, cool, great, good for you.
Yeah,
Your
another miniature.
Mine are still not painted. But if I say, oh, look, I built a watchtower for the table, everyone benefits from that, right? Like, everybody's army looks better when the terrain looks better.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like something that everyone can get excited about, and I feed off that a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And with my YouTube channel, I started it because I had an idea for this terrain piece that I wanted to build, and after I built it, there was a good reception, so I built more and more. And a few videos in, I did one about miniatures, and the excitement was much more muted. So I've kind of just gravitated towards more terrain-based content, just based on the feedback which is kind of weird. That was never really my intention, but I also, I'm building terrain is very gratifying because big pieces come together, boom, 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 and then you've got something. Whereas my attention span struggles with making a really beautiful miniature sometimes, the type of thing that I imagine people would want to watch.
Yeah.
So, like, a lot of my guys are just speed painted and they're meant to be viewed from a little bit farther away. So
yeah, just tabletop ready. Is there a piece of crafting equipment in that case then that you can't live without? What would be your top piece of crafting equipment? That's a hard one. What are your top 2 pieces of crafting equipment?
Gotta be the glue gun.
Yeah.
One is definitely the glue gun. I mean, just to be able to, the fact that it dries so quickly, like if I had to wait for something to bond between every decision I make, like the way I craft, I'm just kind of, I want to build quickly.
Yeah.
I want to see those shapes come together and know if it works or not. And same thing with glue gun. Once something's glued, you can't rip it apart and peel the glue off, and it's like it never happened, right? So that is definitely my number 1 piece of equipment. Second favorite piece of equipment.
You know what, let me rephrase that second part. If the number 1 piece of equipment is your glue gun, what would be your number 1 material?
Oh, it's got to be chipboard.
Okay.
Chipboard is amazing. You can do anything with chipboard if you've got the patience, if you've got enough sharp knife blades. Chipboard is something I learned about through Wylock's Armory.
Wylock,
where he made that amazing, like, Sector Mechanicus style walkway system. And that was before I started my YouTube channel, and I kind of had been brainstorming some things, and that I feel like that clicked something where I was like, oh no, you really can make anything you see with this material.
Yeah.
So, like, I love chipboard. It's cheap, it's light. You can cut it. Everything. It's beautiful.
I'm gonna have to get some. I don't think I've ever used chipboard.
So I think I get a lot of comments, people being like, well, chipboard is like a carpentry product. Like here they call that particle board, where it's like wood chips and it's held in place with glue, and it's like plywood, like similar uses of plywood.
Yep.
So there might be a different name for it in the UK. I'm not really sure.
There may be as well, because referring to, for those of you that are unaware, I live in London, despite how I sound. But back in Australia, chipboard is exactly what you described then. It's a building wood. It's usually a thick wood. It's the same sort of stuff. Like if you take an IKEA cabinet and chop it in half, that sort of bark chips that you get through the middle of the IKEA stuff, that would be chipboard.
Interesting.
So, because the chipboard that I've seen you using, it's super thin, and like you can cut it with scissors.
Yeah,
and
like
stuff.
it's the stuff at the back of a legal pad. So like a notepad.
So it's almost
like
like
that piece of brown cardboard. It's a paper product. It's definitely like a pulped paper product, and I think it even peels apart. Like it's like laminations of recycled paper, I think. Okay. So it's like a thick cardboard. It's like maybe like 2-3 layers of cereal box.
Okay, I'm definitely gonna have to get some.
It's similar to that. So you can cut it with an X-Acto knife. You can get nice, crisp, straight edges. You can, it takes paint well.
Yep.
It's beautiful.
I'm gonna make a note of that. That's fantastic. And when you're building something and you run into, let's say, a large problem, do you scrap the whole thing and start again, or do you try and work out to see if it's
large problem?
Yeah.
So
let's break it up into glued something incorrectly, painted something the entirely wrong color. This shouldn't be here at all, but it's super glued on.
And I have no problem ripping things apart, building them again, painting them again. Like that's part of it, right? Like sometimes you have to, damn the consequences and just make a decision, knowing that it is not that hard to paint something over. Especially when you're painting terrain, you're using a big brush. Like it goes quickly. It's not like you've glazed this thing for 40 hours, right? Like you just paint it again. It's not a big deal. You're not going to lose too much detail. It's a piece of terrain.
Yep.
But I have had some projects where even like in the final stretch when I'm finishing it, I just I hate it and I just don't like it. And those things are like kind of in the Eric's Hobby Workshop vault. They don't get released anywhere. Like nobody sees them except maybe like my close friends and family that I send them to when they're work in progress. And I go, "What do you think?" And they go, yeah,
Yeah, let's try again.
Yeah, so I've had some projects that don't see the light of day because I don't end up happy with them, but
Hmm.
not very many. For the most part, I mean, there's no mistake that you can't fix. If you like the way something was going and then it just goes slightly off, just go back a step. Just rip it up.
Yeah, awesome. Let's see. All right, this is a fun one. What is the best gaming moment that you can remember being a part of?
The best gaming moment. Mm. Well, there was a really sweet one just 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
That I had a friend over to play 40K in my living room for the first time, second time since the pandemic started. So I hadn't been doing much wargaming, and I had a Hellbrute. My Chaos Space Marines are playing his Tyranids, and the Hellbrute is just a basic dreadnought. It's not a super fancy unit. It's not supposed to overperform to the extent it did on the battlefield, but there is a stratagem where you can make it fire twice if it doesn't move.
Mm-hmm.
So this Hellbrute planted its feet at the beginning of the game. It didn't move, and it torched a Lictor that popped up behind it with its melta guns, and then it torched Old One Eye, which is a named character, a really old Carnifex that's really impressive. And then another Carnifex charged it, and it destroyed the Carnifex in close combat. And I was just like hooting and hollering, and my opponent was like on the verge of tears. He wasn't on the verge of tears, but he was upset, because the dice rolls were much better than they should have been.
Uh-huh.
But it was a glorious moment for me. So that's
I'll
go with that one.
Is that what you took a photo of the other day? Did I see a photo on your?
There is a photo on my Instagram of that. Because one of my videos I've done is I make these the flame template things. So I made it wait while I set up the flame template and put some pictures. I mean, I was trying not to gloat too much, but I was losing the battle up to that point. So he let me have my moments. He's a really good sport. So yeah, it was a good time. It was a really good time. Yeah. But if you've ever played, like I did the Mordheim and Necromunda campaigns at my local gaming store, the Brooklyn Strategist. Mm-hmm. And if you've ever played those games, they're just like the dice can do anything, and so many crazy moments happen. So there's a million I could go into, but that's just a recent one.
Yeah, okay, that's awesome. And mind you, if anyone that's watching this, if you haven't seen the what would you call it? The explosion piece? What would you call it?
What's it called? Flames and Explosions or something like that?
Flames and Explosions. If you want to make some seriously awesome like flames and explosion style thing, go watch his video on that. I did, and it's awesome. I'm still yet to make one, but I will, and I'll show you it. So let me just one second. We've asked this. We've asked this. That is the very first one of them that I saw was. I saw it posted through a page called the D&D Coalition. I'm not sure if it is actually theirs or if that was just a repost. I'm not sure. Cam, if you're watching, I'm sorry if it is yours. But it's the mushroom cloud, the mushroom cloud explosion that sort of went around the internet like crazy. Like they just look so effective. It's exactly the same as your ones, but just in mushroom cloud form. But
I've seen a couple versions, yeah. Like, I don't think I was reinventing the wheel with that. There is one thing in there to make the flame template, to make it like a jet of flame rather than just an explosion, that I think I innovated something by using a glue stick. But yeah, I've seen ones like an orc storm boy or whatever they call them, mm-hmm. with the rocket backpack. I've seen a bunch of nice ones like that.
Yeah.
Another little advantage of my method is you don't have to do any soldering. You don't have to know any electrician knowledge. You can just use tea lights like I do because it's more my speed.
Yeah, no, it's the best way to do it. Every single flickering thing you've ever seen I've done is with tea lights as well.
Right, just slap it in. Done.
That's it. Like I can solder just fine, but if I don't have to, then I'm not going to. I'm definitely not going to if I don't have to. Here we go. Here's a good fun one for you. What terrain or miniatures do you think everyone should have if you were interested in the hobby?
What terrain or miniature should everyone have if they're interested in the hobby? Okay, well, you should definitely have a bunch of barrels. Whatever setting you're playing. So if it's fantasy, wooden barrels, obviously. Yep. And if it's 40K, like little oil drums. Mm-hmm. Because they can be barricades, they can add a little bit of flavor to any scene. They can be cover, they can be... I think those are definitely a staple.
You know, I couldn't agree with you more. I was thinking, I was like, I wonder what he's going to say. As I was writing these questions, I think about who I'm going to be asking them to, and there's a few questions which I just think about, and it's like I have no idea what they are going to say, and that's a great one. Barrels, I literally had no idea. My go-to is always little campfires. You know, I've got like 30 of them, but
That's a good one.
Barrels, awesome. Here's a great one. What is your? This is a big question, all right? So watch out for this one. What is your favourite aspect of the whole hobby?
Favorite aspect of the whole hobby? It's a good question. You know, I think that it's a creative outlet on so many levels. And you can really find a way. People express themselves so many ways throughout the hobby. When you with Warhammer, with D&D, really whatever sort of personality you have or whatever interests you have, you can find a creative outlet within the scope of the hobby. Whether it's crafting, whether it's painting, whether it's writing your own lore, or people like to come up with their own stat blocks and lists and creative combinations. Like if they're more mathematically oriented, like my brother's like this. He's very numerically oriented sort of guy, and so he loves to like make competitive Warhammer lists, and he gets so excited about how effective this unit will be on the table that it'll translate to me like, actually that is a pretty cool unit if I painted it up, or if I there's I think it brings all kinds of different people together because people can engage with the hobby on different levels. Like there's like 5 different hobbies in one sort of in this space, right? There's building, there's painting, there's collecting, there's
storytelling,
you can just expanded universe lore enjoyment. So there's so much to it that everybody can engage with it in some way. So it's probably that. And then a close second or tied would be the communities. People are just so nice.
Yeah.
Like everybody's so open to engaging with other people, so helpful, so welcoming, so encouraging. It's just a really nice thing. Not every hobby's like that, and it's pretty nice.
Yeah. Yeah, it's awesome. It's great. It's great to be a part of it, and it's great to be able to meet people such as yourself, and all of the other amazing people that I've met so far. It's really sort of like a big online family almost. Everyone's sort of in it for everyone, which is it's a really humbling thing to be a part of.
Yeah, I mean, because at the end of the day, I think there are a lot of fields where people they hoard their knowledge, and they don't want other people to. But there's no one person who's ever going to be able to build the entire D&D universe, or paint every Warhammer model to the highest standard. And so I think people appreciate that and understand there is something collaborative about the whole hobby as a whole, where you never know what somebody's going to come up with that's going to inspire you, and it's not going to take anything away from you. You know what I mean? Like. Yeah. Somebody can do an idea that you had before you, but that's rare, and that's kind of fun because you sort of realize you're on the same wavelength as another person.
And even if someone has the same idea as you, it's usually 99% of the time executed in, even if it's similar, but a completely different way. So
yeah, totally
awesome. What do you find is the most challenging aspect of the hobby?
Most challenging aspect of the hobby. Well, I think now that I'm doing this more seriously, there are some burnout issues that can happen where sometimes it's easy to get a little bit discouraged, but I don't think that's necessarily part of the hobby, more as part of life, and but maybe a more challenging part of the hobby is not just constantly buying things, realizing that you've got enough to do what you need to do, and that you should just enjoy the stuff you have. I think a lot of people can relate to that. Is maybe just don't buy the next kit yet. You still have so many unpainted ones, or you don't need that material when you can just craft with these ones right now.
I think I see that the most every year or every 2 years whenever Reaper brings out their new Kickstarter, and you just see people pouring hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars and pounds into like I want this expansion and this expansion and this expansion and this expansion, and then it arrives and they think, oh, what am I going to do with the other expansions from last Kickstarter that I haven't even opened yet? And don't get me wrong, if you're one of these people, I'm not talking to you, but if you watching are one of these people, there's nothing wrong with that. Don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with that. It's it is very challenging.
So I see a lot of cool stuff on Kickstarter. I've never backed one yet myself. Mainly because I'm an instant gratification guy. Like I want it to be shipped to me before the novelty wears off. You know what I mean? Like if I get something 9 months later, chances are my enthusiasm will be a little bit dimmed because I'll have moved on to a bunch of other things I'm interested in. And then these things do come full circle. Like every so often I'll dust off an old box of models from 20 years ago, and I'll get super excited about that again, which is one of the really cool things, again, about this hobby is stuff doesn't expire. Yeah. Like if you got models, you can have them for life, really. Like, I know, the hobby's old. Like, if you look at, in the Patriot with Mel Gibson, like his son's got the model soldiers, and he melts them down into musket balls or whatever. Yeah. Like, it's as old as time. Like everybody, it's just real life shrunk down.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
What's not to like? It's infinite.
Exactly, and there's no wrong move that you can do. It's like in every way that you want to do it is the correct way of doing it. It's like it's an unbelievable thing. Let me see. Let me just double check my list here. This one we've already covered. I was about to ask you about planning and stuff, but we've already covered that one. Here we go. Do you have any other hobbies other than tabletop-related things?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I love to read. I really like historical fiction. That's something I get a real kick out of. Bernard Cornwell type stuff. I'm a big fan of Song of Ice and Fire and fantasy novels, like, waiting for some of those to come out. I did martial arts for most of my life. I had a pretty bad back injury a few years ago. I haven't done that in a little while, but I watched Cobra Kai recently, and it makes me want to get back in the dojo. So.
Were you doing karate or were you doing something else?
So I did Taekwondo from the time I was about 10 years old to 18, around there. Yep. So I got a second-degree black belt in Taekwondo, and then I started doing like MMA, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I got to brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and then I had a pretty bad injury. So.
What did you do to yourself?
Herniated disc in L4, L5 lower back. Ouch. And so I have like a ongoing sciatic pain issue, but it's getting better. Oh, it's getting better. I'm managing it well. It just, if anyone who's ever been in a jiu-jitsu mat, once you hit brown belt, black belt, those guys, they move slower. They have a different game. They're no longer doing all the flexibility-based dynamic stuff. They're slowing things down. And I just kind of realized that I needed to take a break for the longevity of my body because I want to be mobile for my whole life, But I am thinking about getting back into the kicking aspects, the Taekwondo side, after watching Cobra Kai, which is a really amazing show, by the way. If you haven't checked out Cobra Kai, check out Cobra Kai.
Yeah, I got my Cobra Kai on. I'm waiting for number 3. I'm waiting to see does Cobra Kai ever die? I guess we find out soon.
Season 3 is apparently already filmed, is what I read.
So
awesome! They filmed it before COVID happened. So
oh, really?
It should be coming out. Yeah. They finished. They probably have post production stuff they haven't done yet because all the studios shut down. But all the filming's already done. So.
Oh man, that's so
exciting!
Good. I just love the fact that it really shows Daniel-san to be, the dick that he really was. But if you haven't watched it, go watch it.
All the characters are a little bit more complex, which I really like about it. Like, there's different points of view to everything.
Yeah.
They dive into that, and that's one of the things that drew me into like the Game of Thrones world. And I try to when I'm running like my D&D campaign for my brothers, I try to bring a little bit of ambiguity, bring a little bit of because you can have these cackling villains that they're two-dimensional and they work in certain circumstances, and sometimes they add to a more complex plot as a foil. But I like the in between, the gray sometimes is more interesting. So.
Yeah.
Cobra Kai does a great job of that.
Yeah, yeah. Me and the wife sat down and did it in like 3 days, 3 or 4 days
Yeah,
for the
it
whole
goes
thing.
quickly. Those short episodes. Yeah.
Yeah, we thought it was a film, and then it ended. I was like, one sec, what are you talking about? Oh, the rest of the series. Yes, next
Yeah,
4 days is sorted. Um, as far as hobby related stuff is concerned, who are your sort of like hobby idol people? Like I know you mentioned Wylock before, as far as you know, materials and someone that you used to watch before you started your own stuff. Is there who do you look up to? Who's your hobby goal person?
Um, so growing up, it was definitely like I'm not sure how to say it. I think it's Mike McGavee.
Mm-hmm.
It was a guy who used to work for Games Workshop, and he used to do these dioramas um, in the old White Dwarfs and stuff like that. He has one in particular that's wood elves, and they're in sort of a quarry, and they're charging into these skeletons coming out of the forest.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not strictly terrain, but the added context of the background and the setting and the trees and the stones, making it a whole self-contained vignette,
Yeah.
really clicked something for me that just took me and into another level where I just wanted to build more complete scenes, because a model just on its own can look great with that gradiated blue background or whatever, but when it's in a context, it takes on a whole narrative. You know what I mean? It takes on a whole more complex thing to it. And he did another one that's like a temple city of lizard men being invaded by the Estalians, which are the sort of Spaniards in the Warhammer world, and they're dressed as conquistadors, and there's some Saurus warriors with the knife to the throat of a guy about to be thrown in a sacrificial pit, and everything just sort of hangs on a razor's edge, and there's tension and story and drama, and it's just fantastic. And so that's the guy I totally looked up to as I was growing up.
Yeah.
And then when I was in, I guess 5, 6, 7 years ago, there was a guy on these forums that I used to always see the work of, a guy named Wolfgang. I mentioned this in one of my recent videos because I can't really track down too much about this guy. Like, all the websites he used to post on were in German. And I took 1 year of German class when I was in grade 9, and I didn't pay very much attention, so it's hard to get the full story.
Mm-hmm.
But he used to make these fantastic model castles, and he did a Mordheim board, and everything he made was out of foam. And this was sort of, this was 7 years ago. Like, I had never seen anybody do these complex things. Like, I'd seen people cut those tiered hills in White Dwarf with foam, but I'd never seen really the potential of XPS foam, which, as you know, is one of the best crafting materials of all time. If I hadn't said chipboard, I would have said XPS foam, probably, because there's just so much you can do with it.
Yeah, foam is an amazing thing.
Yeah, and then as far as on the YouTube side, I mean, it's, the guys like Black Magic Craft, these guys that have been just creating content and sort of revolutionizing the way that people engage with the hobby. Like, just the guys that make this easily accessible stuff that people who have never crafted before or never thought about it can be entertained by their videos enough until, 10 episodes in, they go, you know what, I'll give it a shot.
Yeah.
So guys that are bringing new people in the hobby all the time like that, I love it. Neil from Real Terrain Hobbies is a guy who just makes fantastic high-level stuff that I really look up to.
Massive boards, that huge castle of his, my lord.
Beautiful, yeah. And, he's an innovator in terms of techniques, too. Like, I learn something every time I watch it, because he's not afraid to try new things. And, I'm sure there's a lot that I'm missing, but those guys are, I look up to a lot of people. You can, it's something from the martial arts world, is you're a student for life. Like, you should have that mentality of you're always a student. You can learn from everybody. You can learn from anyone at any stage in their journey, And I've seen people who come into this hobby and they've been in the hobby for a week and they do something that I never would have thought of doing, because they don't really have those preconceived structures in their mind of what you should do and shouldn't do. Mm-hmm. And so you can always learn. You can always learn from anybody.
Exactly. You only stop learning when you're dead. I wholeheartedly agree. Like, there's a lot of stuff that I've seen in your videos, because I haven't watched too many sort of like tutorial videos from. Like, I like them, right? I've watched a lot of them, but I'm not one of these sort of people that sits down and watches tutorial videos. If I like the person, then I'll watch their videos. So, like, I like watching you. You're a engaging person to watch. Especially as soon as you dyed your hair blonde on that first one, where you know, the big swoop. That was glorious, absolutely glorious. You know what just as simple as you know, those the toy that you use, that blocks that you use to make your pathways.
It's called a ruminate.
Them.
Yeah, it's like a dollhouse building toy.
Yeah, you know, like just being able to put something like that in it, or you know, or I've seen other people that just take Matchbox cards or Hot Wheels cars and you just take little parts out of it, and they go, "This is now this," and you go, "Well, of course it is. How did I not see that before?"
Yeah.
So that's awesome. Is there anything that you have always wanted to build and haven't yet?
Definitely. There's lots of things. One that maybe I'll do it in the next little while is like an ice board, like a winter sort of thing. That's something I've always thought would be really cool. The thing that's held me back is when you have your models and they have a little chunk of terrain on their base, right? And it's almost always like temperate, you know, brown dirt, green grass. So to do something like a desert board or a winter board, you don't want to have, you know, guys with their bare arms with green grass in their base on this winter battlefield. Yeah. So I've had a hard time getting over that because I want them to look like they're integrated in the scene. But I really like, you know, I'm from Alberta originally, and the mountains are right there, and there's this sort of winter and mountains, and there's so much beauty there, like frozen waterfalls, all that stuff. I've always wanted to do that, and I've done very little experimentation on how to do a convincing ice effect or something, but it's something I'll get to for sure one day.
That I'm looking forward to seeing you do, because I have also not gotten around to doing ice or snow style stuff, and I'm very intrigued, and there's a lot of different ways of doing it, and I'm also looking forward to finding a one that works. Have you seen now? There's a few people. I haven't seen too many people, but it's starting to become a little bit more popular. I've started doing it recently, of using clear bases.
I've seen a little bit of that. I have mixed feelings about it. Mixed feelings because I'm kind of a nostalgia purist that likes the old bases from. I have a real strong preference for the old metal minis that from the era when I was growing up, and I don't think it's purely nostalgia. I think a lot of them are in like the Necromunda minis I have. A lot of them are the old Perry Brothers sculpts, and the Perry Brothers now they do all historical minis, and back then you could see that sort of where they came from and the way they sculpt. Everything's grounded, everything's proportioned like normal humans, and that's kind of what I'm more interested in these days. And like the old Bretonian line is another good example. As a kid, I was like, what, knights? So what? You know, but now that I'm a little bit older, I'm like, oh, this is actually really cool. You can get into heraldry, you can get into all these different things. So really, I like those old metal miniatures. And a lot of the time they're just unstable unless they have that metal tag on their feet because they aren't heavy. And so they have to go in that slot of base. But I mean, Clear bases, I've seen them done extremely, extremely well, where you're looking at a scene and you go, oh man, you get that little tingle of maybe I should rebase all my guys on clear bases, but I'm probably not going to do it anytime soon.
I've only seen one or two recently that I've really liked, and they were from like big tavern scenes and you know, that sort of thing, so you can see the floor through it or that sort of thing, you know, where it's not outdoors, because as who was I watching the other day? I think it was Luke Fellows. I think it was him that said, I'm not sure, on one of his recent videos, but he was basically saying, like, you know, you can get an amazing looking base and it makes a crappy paint job look good, you know?
Yeah.
You know, coming from, you know, where I'm coming from anyway, from where I come from, the terrain primarily, if I can make the base look good and take the focus away from I'm going to put eyes and face in inverted commas, as opposed to my just... slapping on a cream color and putting a bit of a face wash on there, and it's good enough. Yeah, but that's you know, that takes me to a question on here which I wasn't going to ask, but
hang on before you move on. I have another thing to add to that, which is right in front of me here. What I'm working on right now is a good example of why I might not move on to clear bases. Is I've got a Primaris Marine here, Blood Angel, and I've got an old librarian. This is from like 2nd, 3rd edition, and he's much, much shorter. So I put him on some stacks of bark there to try to give him the right tabletop presence in comparison to this Primaris Marine. And that's a good example of something that you could not do with clear bases is make him sort of
Yeah,
cheat his stature up. Because look at, he looks like his little brother.
Here's something based on that exactly. Just because I don't know much Warhammer stuff. I'm learning, but like I've got a box of Space Marines here, which are for memory Imperial Guard. I don't know, little blue and yellow things with a horseshoe on their, like the
Ultramarines sounds like.
That's them. Now, I've got a box of them, and it was the box that my mum bought me. And I got that box in 1993.
Okay.
And I got a Mortal Realms magazine the other day because they just had one in the shop for some reason. And it had those the big, they all look like clerics. With big flowing capes and stars around their heads and whatever these guys are. They're huge. They're absolutely massive. Like new Warhammer, it's like one's this big and one's like that big. So the question is, let's say I'm playing against you and I want to play Ultramarines and you want to play, I don't know, Grey Knights or whatever. Are all the old models still exactly the same as far as rules and stuff is concerned, or do the tiny ones have tiny little health stats, and do the big ones have bigger health stats?
Well, yeah, they've released the Primaris Marines. They did a couple years ago, and so there's some really interesting things with scale going on. Like 28 millimeter scale was originally kind of what Warhammer was, which is, from my understanding, 28 millimeters means 28 millimeters measured from the feet to the eye level of a 6 foot tall character. And which is already a very strange measurement. Like, why to the eye level? Why not to the top of the head? And then within that, it seems like there might not have been internal consistency. Like, they would have what would be a hulking Terminator was the same size as an average human. Both of them scaled to be 28 millimeters to the eye level. So Space Marines in the lore are supposed to be genetically enhanced super soldiers that have had all these organs added to them, and they're something like 8 feet tall. And if you read any of the Black Library books, that's what they're like. They're giants. And on the tabletop, they just weren't reflected that way. They were about the same size as, your average citizen and Imperial Guardsman. And sometimes you'd look at them and squint and go, how would this guy even get into this armor? Like, they're about the same size, and this guy's got all the armor on. How does that even work? So the Primaris range was it was an excuse for them to rescale all the minis, but they also wrote some new lore saying, oh, these aren't just Space Marines, these are the new Space Marines that are super, super soldiers. So it's a juggling act because they don't want to make everybody's minis obsolete all at once, but they also want to fix the scale issues in that way, and also scale is creeping up in general, which is you can just fit more details on a larger mini, and it's just going up that way. Maybe my grandkids will be playing with G.I. Joe sized Marines.
It'll definitely be easier to paint the eyes.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you paint eyes, or are you just like let's put on a Nuln oil wash and leave it at that?
I paint eyes sometimes. So sometimes you look at the sculpt, and sometimes the eyeball could be construed as a lower eyelid and there's squinting, and then you don't need to paint the eyes. But sometimes you have to paint the eyes. If the eyelid is clearly delineated from the eye, you don't want them to look like their eyes are glazed over. So what I do is I do black, and then I do 2 dots of white. So I try to leave a little bit of an outline of the black, and then the 2 dots of white will just be the white of the eyes. And that's my method for painting eyes. I've never got any more in depth than that.
Cool. That was my next question. So because there's quite a few ways of doing eyes, and from the draw a slit and then painting the rest, and then what you've just said, and I've only ever gotten eyes to look okay once.
I'm getting better at it. Actually. I'm getting better at it, and the way that I've gotten better at it is just I also loading the brush is really important. You got to have a brush with a good tip, but you also have to have the right amount of paint on it that it's not just going to flood into the crease, and it's not just going to. Sometimes you touch the eye and no paint comes off if the paint is dried on your brush because you're trying to do too much at once.
Yeah. And
then you push a little bit harder, and then all of a sudden, you got a big blob.
Do you use a
So
tiny, like, super, 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 super smallest brush that you can find, or do you use a regular brush with a sharp tip?
regular brush with a sharp tip. Yeah, it's usually the way to go. And I use a wet palette, which is
Yeah.
really
Yeah, that
made
was a
me a
game
better
changer.
painter in a big way. Yeah.
Mm. Let me think. What else can I ask you? Because I've gone through. Believe it or not, I've gone through all of my. That's been asked. That's been asked. That's been asked. Realistically, I only have one page with a list of questions on it. But
Just duplicated it a bunch of times.
I planned on swapping them for for video effect, but then I just couldn't be bothered. I thought let's just make it look professional. Now you took part twice in my monthly 10 by 10, and it was an absolute honour having you take part.
My pleasure.
There's been quite a few people in it this month and last month as well asking me, when's Eric coming back? When's Eric coming back? Why isn't he in this one? Hey, can you get Eric to come back? Because they really like your builds. B, they want to be in a group with you because you're a pretty cool dude and you got 31,000 YouTube subscribers, Mr. Famous Man. And on top of everything, you're just easy to chat with, and you're full of tips and techniques, and it's really great. So if you ever want to join in with that again, you're more than welcome whenever you want. It was an absolute pleasure having you as part of it. It's been an absolute pleasure getting to know you over the past however many months, almost a year, I think. I really wish you all the best for the future, for everything that happens with your YouTube stuff, with your Instagram stuff, with your hobby-related stuff, in whichever direction you want to take it in, with your family stuff. I hope life in New York or wherever you choose to move to, I hope it works out for the best. You deserve it, mate. You seem like you've got your head screwed on in some form of fashion. So
thank you. I appreciate that, and likewise. You're getting pretty famous yourself there on Instagram. You got kind of you're really good at bringing people together, and the groups and the competitions are really fun. I'm sure I will jump in one another time when I have the ideas that match the 10 by 10 base size. Then that's when I like to jump in, and it's nice. Even for somebody who's never been in one, you should jump in one, because it's nice to have a group of people all starting at the same time and finishing at the same time, because projects without a deadline can just go forever, right? And it's nice to have a little bit of structure around that, as well as people to bounce ideas off. So I really like what you've done with the whole encounter terrain competitions. I think they're wonderful. And all the best in the future, man.
The motto behind it is build your terrain, but build your community first. So that's what it's about, So even if you don't build something, as long as you've made friends and that sort of thing, that's all fine. And the one thing that they have been telling me primarily over the past couple of months relating to you directly is they all saw your build off where you had to end up reviewing young Sheldon. And they keep asking me about that, and they keep saying, why don't you go challenge Eric? And I keep telling them I don't want to have to watch a crappy TV show. But, again, they are still continually pushing me. So one day, I may challenge you. I'm not sure. But
Sure.
Who knows? It'll be a bit of fun.
The idea for that challenge is from my brothers. They have a fantasy football league, and they just have these bets all the time that just crack me up, and I wanted to do something like that. So that idea was actually lifted from one of their side bets in their fantasy football league, and they've got tons of them. So if you ever want to do a challenge, we could set something up for sure.
Okay, you know what? I'll say yes straight off the bat. Let me know where and when and how, and yeah, let's do it. That sounds awesome.
For sure.
I think that's about it. Let me just double check that I've gone through everything here. I'm pretty sure I have. Is there anything that you would like to tell the universe?
I don't know. Go check out my YouTube. Go check out Encounter Terrain, obviously, although if they're already watching this interview, they probably found it. Didn't think too much about that one. But yeah, go check out my YouTube page. Hit me up on Instagram. All that good stuff.
Awesome. And my final question is, what is the correct pronunciation of your last name?
Locke.
Locke,
Like
okay.
Lock and key.
Yep. Okay.
LOCKE, lock.
I didn't want to say Loki. I didn't want to say locks. I didn't want to say okay, lock. Okay, awesome. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been watching me chat with Eric Locke from Eric's Hobby Workshop on YouTube. Make sure you check it out. It's fantastic. I did. That's how I found out about him. And I hope you've enjoyed watching this interview of us wearing snappy suits, because it's an interview, so let's wear suits. Why not? Who are you wearing? No, don't answer that, please.
I'll tell you, I'm about to turn the air conditioning on right as soon as I get off this call. I'm already starting to sweat a little bit. I had to turn it off because it's extremely loud. But yeah.
Oh boy, yeah, actually,
I enjoy it. I enjoy it. I haven't put on a suit in a while. It's nice to dress up a little bit.
It is, yeah, especially in times like this, because I think we're about to enter lockdown number 2 very, very shortly. Our numbers are skyrocketing again because, woo, no one here listens to anyone. Anyway, that's what we're doing. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, Eric. Let's do this again at some point. It's been an honour getting to know you, and an absolute pleasure having known you. And I think I said the same thing in about 4 different ways. So
yeah, great. Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed it.
Amazing.
And we'll talk soon.
Amazing. Thank you very much. Enjoy. Have a good night. Say hi to the family, and stay safe.
Likewise.
Cheers, mate.